Last time we talked about cartoons that never got a DVD release. But this time we're going to take it one step further. Today we're going to be talking about lost cartoons. Even when a show doesn't get a physical release, oftentimes you can still find them online in some form. Usually it's because people will have them recorded on old VHS tapes, and we're nice enough to rip the tapes and put it up on YouTube. And in some cases, you can find bootleg DVDs of a lot of stuff that was never released. But today we're going to be talking about shows that never got any release whatsoever. Either they had aired very briefly and were quickly forgotten about, or they were announced and ready to come out, but for one reason or another they never did, and there's only a little bit of evidence of their existence at all. People have often told me I'm just as much of an archivist as I am a reviewer, and I guess there's a lot of truth in that. In fact, one of the reasons I kept doing cartoon clip shows was because I kept finding a lot of shows that were old and forgotten about, and I found them to be very interesting, and stuff like that fascinates me. So today, we're going to be playing detective, and I really wanted to use this magnifying glass in a video again. So we're going to be looking at 5 cartoons that are lost and need to be found. Number 5 is Wolf-Rock TV from 1984. It was an animated series starring Wolfman Jack, baby! Oh! Sorry. Aside from the fact that Wolfman Jack was in the show, not really much is known about it. It was very short-lived. I think it only listed about 7 episodes in the sources that I saw, and it involved a bunch of teenage kids and a talking parrot, and they would play rock shows, and based on the cast, I assume they got into Scooby-Doo-like shenanigans. There was also supposed to be some live-action segments in the show, which involved interviews and rock and roll news, as well as them playing some live-action music videos. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put this on the list, because it reminded me of a show I reviewed on Cartoon Clip Show a long time ago called Kid Video, which was a very similar setup, although much more surreal. But it's funny I made that connection, because after the show got canceled for low ratings, of course, they actually reran episodes alongside Kid Video. But with Kid Video, a lot of episodes have been recovered and can be found online, but Wolf-Rock TV seems to have been lost. The only evidence of its existence is someone actually found the theme song of the show, audio only, which they set to a slideshow. A few animation cells have been found as well, which give us a good clear image of some of the characters, and it's mentioned very briefly in an ABC promo featuring Weird Al. And on the show's IMDb page, there's one-star review written by someone who allegedly worked on the show and basically said it was their first job out of art school and they were desperate for some work. Ouch. So yeah, I think it's safe to say this one is probably not very good, but the way I see it, we'll never know how not good it is until we see it for ourselves. Number 4 is Vor-Tech, Undercover Conversion Squad from 1996. This show was supposed to be Kenner's successor to M.A.S.K. It involved a very similar premise where they had these characters who put on these masks and helmets, and they pilot these vehicles that transform into other, more ridiculous vehicles. However, after reading up on the plot of the show, it actually sounds kind of interesting. It's about the brother of the main protagonist becoming evil and wanting to turn people into mindless cyborg zombies, and they have this whole cyberpunk dystopian future thing going on, and it actually sounds pretty cool. Of all the lost cartoons on this list, this one left the most behind, because you can actually find the intro to the show on YouTube, but it's very low quality, alongside 1 or 2 other very short clips. And of course, there is the toy line, which you can purchase on the secondhand market, like on eBay. And despite learning that the show apparently ends on a cliffhanger, I do think it deserves to be released, maybe even on DVD. I mean, heck, M.A.S.K got a DVD release, and M.A.S.K is getting a live-action movie soon, so I think it's the perfect time to... Wait, M.A.S.K is getting a live-action movie? You've got to be kidding me! Number 3 is Toon Maker's Sailor Moon, and I know, just hear me out, okay? In 1994, Toon Makers created a concept for an American cartoon based loosely on Sailor Moon. The idea was to try and get Saban and Bandai to fund the show and air it on Fox alongside all of Saban's other shows at the time. The show was going to feature live-action segments of real actors, and once they transform into the Sailor Scouts, it was going to go full animation. I guess they were trying to do something similar to a lot of shows like Power Rangers at the time. Needless to say, the show was not picked up. However, one thing I find kind of interesting is that not long after this show was pitched, Saban created another show called Tenko and the Guardians of the Magic, which is one of the most awkward titles ever. Tenko and the Guardians of the Magic seemed to be what the Sailor Moon show could have been. There was live action segments with this show as well, which involved a magician doing tricks, and then the animated segments was about that magician fighting off evil in sort of an Americanized magical girl type of show. So it is possible that a lot of the ideas for the Sailor Moon show got recycled into this show. As for the Sailor Moon show itself, a lot of animation cells have popped up over the years because many of them were found in an old storage locker. So again, we can get a good clear shot of what the characters were going to look like. But most infamously, at 1998's Anime Expo, a promo video for the show had been shown, and somebody recorded it with their camera, and that video has been floating around the internet for some time now. But there is so much footage in that promo video that there is a good chance that they actually did produce at least an episode. And allegedly, a 17-minute long pilot does exist. However, it's never been found. I have a feeling a lot of Sailor Moon fans are sneering at me right now for even bringing this up, but like it or not, it is still part of the show's history, and on a personal level, I think it would be fun to watch this and maybe riff on it and make fun of it. So I do think it deserves to be found, and maybe one day we'll get to see the awfulness for ourselves. Number 2, The Young Astronauts from 1986. The exact details about the show are kind of speculative. Some say it's about a boy who gets blasted off into space, so basically Lost in Space, except it's just Will Robinson. There were also supposed to be segments on the show that featured real-life astronauts, possibly in live-action segments, most likely to educate children on space travel. Supposedly 13 episodes of it were produced, and one actually made it to air on January 26, 1986. 2 days later is when the Challenger space shuttle broke up on re-entry. It was one of the worst disasters in aeronautics history. While the country mourned the loss of the astronauts that were on that space shuttle, it was decided that the show would be pulled, and it was never seen again. One thing I do find interesting is that about a year later, NASA actually got involved in the creation of another animated series, Starcom, which obviously got a DVD release. The idea was again to help educate children on the space program, though this show was more of a typical 80s cartoon as it had a toy line tied into it. As for the little astronauts, no footage, audio, or images of it have ever resurfaced. In fact, the only evidence it had existed in the first place was that it was mentioned in an old ad for CBS's Saturday morning lineup alongside a bunch of other shows, as well as a creepy illustration of Hulk Hogan. As I said before, 13 episodes of this show were produced, and if they do still exist, I would love to see it finally get a DVD release. I think more than enough time has passed that we've recovered from the Challenger disaster, and this show definitely deserves to be seen. But even still, there was that one episode that made it to air, which surprisingly has never been found. Even with obscure shows, usually someone will put an old VHS recording up on YouTube or something. I find it hard to believe that nobody has that recorded. So, to anybody out there who was watching and recording cartoons in 1986, check your old VHS tapes. Someone out there has got to have that one episode. And finally, number 1, Operation Aliens. Yes, for those of you who don't know, they were going to make an animated series based on the Aliens franchise. For kids! So in 1992, NECA produced a bunch of Aliens action figures of the Space Marines, as well as a bunch of aliens which are now hybrids of other animals. And I don't think anybody really questioned why they would do that about 6 years after the movie had come out. Mostly because, well, in my opinion, the toy line is very, very underrated. But it turns out it was supposed to tie in with an animated series. It was going to feature characters who were killed off in the movie, so obviously it was going to not be canon with the rest of the series. Aside from a lot of the obvious things about the Aliens franchise, not really much is known about what this show was going to be about. But there were a lot of clues in the toy line that might give us a good idea. Each of the action figures was packaged with a mini-comic that can be combined into one long narrative, And there was a line of trading cards which also featured a very short comic that was going to be based on the cartoon. Aside from that, tons of screenshots of it were found on the website of the Korean animation studio that worked on it, and just based on how it looked like it was going to be pretty cool. I even found a picture of a promo poster for it. Wow. I would love to get my hands on that. Of course, the show was not picked up because it was deemed too violent. Obviously. But based on the amount of screenshots that were found, I think it's safe to say at least one episode or maybe even a short pilot of it does exist. So I would love to find it. So here's hoping one day it gets found because, again, it looks pretty cool. So that's my list of 5 lost cartoons that need to be found. If anybody out there knows of any other interesting stories about lost cartoons, feel free to leave a comment below and maybe I'll do a follow-up video on this. In the meantime, we need to find these 5 lost cartoons. If I was a richer man, I'd put bounties on their heads, but I'm not, so we're just in it for the thrill. My name is Rob, and let the hunt begin.